Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Japan Archives, and this is going to be the bonus episode, I think. Well, no, I don't think. I know it is going to be a bonus episode. I said we were going to get into the story about the vampire cat because I thought it would be interesting to tell the story right after doing the Pokemon one. So yeah, this is a quick bonus episode. You know the drill. We just kind of get into it. There's no poem or musical section to these episodes, but I always ask how you are, Heather. So I know it's not been that long since. Well, no, it has been long since we did the last recording because that one took so long because we talked
a long time.
For such a long time. The editing kept crashing the laptop, which is why it took so long. That was a lot of fun.
It was so
not
much
stressful
fun.
At all.
The talking was fun. The editing was not as much fun.
Yeah, true. So hopefully this one will not be as long as the previous recording. So yeah, but you're okay? You doing all right this week?
Yeah, rolling along. Spring is coming. I can feel it. I know it's here soon. They're talking about spring allergies starting early this year. It'll be exciting. How about you?
I wonder what will happen this year with the cherry blossom viewings with Corona. We'll have to see.
Oh, I wonder. Oh, in Tokyo and
because last year they encouraged people not to go.
They ended up blocking off a lot of places too. Like they put up barriers.
Yeah, but they couldn't stop people going to the parks where the other trees were. So unfortunately, a lot of people still went and sat and had their picnics out under the blossoms. I mean, granted, they were distancing. I don't know. I feel that maybe more people want to go out and do it this year because they didn't get the chance last year if they didn't go to a park.
We did get a chance to go to a park, like kind of up in the mountains. We walked around. We didn't have like a Hanami, but we did walk around and wore masks outside the whole time. But yeah, no Hanami. I don't know this year if we can, like if it's able to socially distance. I feel like at least in my area that they might be okay because the cases are way down here as opposed to Tokyo. Even though cases are going down in Tokyo as well, I feel like they might say as long as you socially distance, you stay at least 6 feet away, and even in your own party, if you keep it like parties of 4 or less, maybe they might put that caveat.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to see how it goes.
Well, this year I definitely am going to take my bento, and me and the professor are going to go and hopefully sit outside, eat really fast, and then go back to the car. I'm hoping.
Well, it's the best we can do right now. But I'm sure we'll talk about it later again on the podcast when it happens. But anyway, sorry. Yes, I'm doing fine. I had my second interview for that job, and I'll hear back in a few days to see if I got it. So maybe the next time we record, I'll have good news or I'll have bad news. We'll find out.
Fingers crossed. Many fingers crossed.
Yeah, thank you. So the story I have, again, I like these stories because they're so old. We get to read the originals, or at least the original translations, so we get it as it was. So this one comes from Tales of Old Japan by A.B. Mitford from 1871. So a really old translation. So if you are ready, I am going to read you The Vampire Cat of Nabeshima.
Yes, I can't wait to hear it now.
I'm just going to ignore that and start reading. So, there is a tradition in the Nabeshima family of the Hizen daimyo that many years ago, the Prince of Hizen was bewitched and cursed by a cat that had been kept by one of his retainers. The prince had in his house a lady of rare beauty called Otoyo. Amongst all his ladies, she was the favorite, and there was none who could rival her charms and accomplishments. One day, the prince went out into the garden with Otoyo and remained enjoying the fragrance of the flowers until sunset, when they returned to the palace, never noticing that they were being followed by a large cat. Having parted with her lord, Otoyo retired to her own room and went to bed. At midnight she awoke with a start and became aware of the huge cat that crouched watching her. And when she cried out, the beast sprang on her, and fixing its cruel teeth into her delicate throat, throttled her to death. What a piteous end for such a fair dame, the darling of her prince's heart, to die suddenly, bitten to death by a cat. Then the cat, having scratched out a grave under the veranda, buried the corpse of Otoyo, and assuming her form, began to bewitch the prince. But my lord the prince knew nothing of this, and little thought that the beautiful creature who caressed and fondled him was an impish and foul beast that had slain his mistress and assumed her shape in order to drain out his life's blood. Day by day, as time went on, the prince's strength dwindled away. The color of his face was changed, and became pale and livid, and he was as a man suffering from a deadly sickness. Seeing this, his counselors and his wife became greatly alarmed. So they summoned the physicians, who prescribed various remedies for him. But the more medicine he took, the more serious did his illness appear, and no treatment was of any avail. But most of all did he suffer in the night time, when his sleep would be troubled and disturbed by hideous dreams. In consequence of this, his counselors nightly appointed 100 of his retainers to sit and watch over him. But strange to say, towards 10 o'clock on the very first night that the watch was set, the guards were seized by a sudden and unaccountable drowsiness, which they could not resist, until one by one every man had fallen asleep. It was then the false Otoyo came in and harassed the prince until morning. The following night the same thing occurred, and the prince was subjected to the imp's tyranny, while his guards slept helplessly around him. Night after night this was repeated, until at last 3 of the prince's counselors determined themselves to sit upon guard, and see whether they could overcome this mysterious drowsiness. But they fared no better than the others, and by 10 o'clock they were fast asleep. The next day the 3 counselors held a solemn conclave, and their chief, Isahaya Buzon, said, "This is a marvelous thing, that a guard of 100 men should thus be overcome by sleep. Of a surety the spell that is upon my lord and upon his guard must be the work of witchcraft. Now as all our efforts are of no avail, let us seek out Ruiten, the chief priest of the temple called Mio-in, and beseech him to put up prayers for the recovery of my lord." And the other counselors approving what Buzan had said, they went to the priest and engaged him to recite litanies that the prince might be restored to health. So it came to pass that the priest offered up nightly prayers for him. One night at the 9th hour, when he had finished his religious exercises and was preparing to lie down to sleep, he fancied that he had heard a noise outside in the garden, as if someone were washing himself at the well. Deeming this strange, he looked down from the window, and there in the moonlight he saw a handsome young soldier, some 24 years of age, washing himself, who, when he had finished cleaning, put on his clothes, stood before the figure of Buddha, and prayed fervently for the recovery of his lord. Ruiten looked on in admiration, and the young man, when he had made an end to his prayer, was going away. But the priest stopped him, calling out to him to say, "Sir, I pray you tarry a little. I have something to say to you." "At your reverence's service," was the reply. "What may you please to want?" "Pray be so good as to step up here and have a little talk with me," the priest said. And so that is what happened. The priest continued, "Sir, I cannot conceal my admiration that you, being such a young man, should have so loyal a spirit. I am Ruiten, the chief priest of this temple, who am engaging in praying for the recovery of the Lord. Pray, what is your name?" "My name, sir," he replied, "is Ito Soda, and I am serving in the infantry of Nabeshima. Since my lord has been sick, my one desire has been to assist in nursing him, but, being only a simple soldier, I am not of sufficient rank to come to his presence. So I have no resource to pray to the gods of the country and to Buddha that my lord may regain his health." When Ruiten heard this, he shed tears in admiration of the fidelity of Ito Soda and said, "Your purpose is indeed a good one, but what a strange sickness this is that the Lord is afflicted with. Every night he suffers from horrible dreams, and the retainers who sit up with him are all seized with a mysterious sleep, so that none may keep awake. It is very wonderful." "Yes," replied Soda, "this certainly must be witchcraft. If I could but obtain leave to sit one night with the prince, I would fain see whether I could not resist this drowsiness and detect the goblin." At last the priest said, "I am in relations of friendship with Isahaya, the chief counselor of the prince. I will speak to him of you and of your loyalty, and will intercede with him that you may attain your wish." "Indeed, sir, I am most thankful," he replied. "I am not prompted by any vain thought of self-advancement. Should I succeed, all I wish for is the recovery of my lord. I commend myself to your kind favor." On the following evening, Soda returned to the temple, and having found Ruiten, accompanied him to the house of Isahaya. Then the priest, leaving Soda outside, went in to converse with the counselor, and inquire after the prince's health. "And pray, sir, how is the lord? Is he any better since I have been offering up my prayers?" "Indeed, no, his illness is still very severe. We are certain that he must be a victim of some foul sorcery. But as there are no means of keeping a guard awake after 10 o'clock, we cannot catch a sight of this goblin, so we are in the greatest trouble." "I feel deeply for you," said Ruiten. "It must be most distressing. However, I have something to tell you. I think that I have found a man who will detect this goblin, and I have brought him with me." "Indeed, who is this man?" was the reply. "Well, he is one of the Lord's foot soldiers, named Ito Soda, a faithful fellow, and I trust that you will grant his request to be permitted to sit up with my lord." "Certainly it shall happen. It is wonderful to find such a loyal and zeal in a common soldier. Still, it is impossible to allow such a man of such low rank to perform the office of watching over my lord." "It is true that he is but a common soldier," urged the priest, "but why not raise his rank in consideration of his fidelity, and then let him—" "It would be time enough to promote him after my lord's recovery," was the response. "But come, let me see this Ito Soda, that I may know what manner of man he is. If he pleases me, I will consult with the other counselors, and perhaps we may grant his request." When he returned, the priest presented Ito Soda to the counselor, who looked at him attentively, and being pleased with his comely and gentle appearance, said, "So I hear that you are anxious to be permitted to mount guard in my lord's room at night. Well, I must consult with the other counselors, and we shall see what can be done for you." When the young soldier heard all of this, he was greatly elated, and took his leave after warmly thanking Buiten, who had helped him gain his object. The next day the councillors met and sent for Ito Soda, and told him that he might keep watch with the other retainers that very night. So he went in his way home in very high spirits, and at nightfall, having made all his preparations, took his place among the 100 gentlemen who were on duty in the prince's bedroom. Now the prince slept in the centre of the room, and the 100 guards around him sat keeping themselves awake with entertaining conversation and pleasant conceits. But as 10 o'clock approached, they began to doze off as they sat, and in spite of all their endeavours to keep another one awake, by degrees they all slept. Ita Soda all the while felt an irresistible desire to sleep creeping over him, and though he tried by all sorts of ways to rouse himself, he saw that there was no help for it, but by resorting to an extreme measure, for which he had already made preparations. Drawing out a piece of oil paper which he had brought with him, and spreading it over the mats, he sat down upon it. Then he took a small knife which he carried in the sheath of his dirk, and stuck it into his own thigh. For a while the pain of the wound kept him awake, but as the slumber in which he was assailed was the work of sorcery, little by little he became drowsy again. Then he twisted the knife round and round in his thigh, so that the pain became very violent. But the pain kept him awake. Now the oil paper which he had spread under his legs was in order to prevent the blood, which might spurt from the wound, from defiling the mats. So Ito Soda remained awake, but the rest of the guards slept. As he watched, suddenly the sliding doors of the prince's room were drawn open, and he saw a figure coming in stealthily, and as it drew nearer, the form was that of a marvelously beautiful woman some 23 years of age. Cautiously she looked around, and when she saw that all the guards were asleep, she smiled an ominous smile, and was going up to the prince's bedside when she perceived that in the corner of the room there was a man yet awake. This seemed to startle her, but she went up to Soda and said, "I am not used to seeing you here. Who are you?" "My name is Ito Soda, and this is the first night that I have been on this guard." "A troublesome office, truly. Why, here all the rest of the guard asleep. How is it that you alone are awake? You are a trusty watchman." "What is that wound on your knee?" replied the beautiful woman. "It's all red with blood." "Oh, I felt very sleepy, so I stuck my knife into my thigh, and the pain of it has kept me awake." "What wondrous loyalty," said the lady. "Is it not the duty of a retainer to lay down his life for his master?" Ito Soda replied. "Is such a scratch as this worth thinking about?" Then the lady went up to the sleeping prince and said, "How fares it with the lord tonight?" But the prince, worn out with sickness, made no reply. But Soda was watching her eagerly, and guessed that it was Otoyo, and made up his mind that if she attempted to harass the prince, he would kill her on the spot. The goblin, however, which was in the form of Otoyo, had been tormenting the prince every night, and had come again that night for no other purpose, was defeated by the watchfulness of Ito Soda. For whenever she drew near to the sick man, thinking to put her spells upon him, she would turn and look behind her, and there she saw Ito Soda glaring at her. So she had no help for it but to go away again and leave the prince undisturbed. At last the day broke, and the other officers, when they awoke and opened their eyes, saw that Ito Soda had kept awake by stabbing himself in the thigh, and they were greatly ashamed and went home crestfallen. That morning Ito Soda went to the home of Isahaya Buzan, and told him all that had occurred the previous night. The councillors were all loud in their praises of him, and ordered him to keep watch again the next night. At the same hour, the false Otoyo came and looked all around the room, and all the guards were asleep, except for him, who was wide awake, and so, being again frustrated, she returned to her own apartments. Now, as since Soda had been on guard, the prince had passed quiet nights, his sickness beginning to get better, and there was great joy in the palace, and Soda was promoted and rewarded with an estate. In the meanwhile, Otoyo, seeing that her nightly visits bore no fruits, kept away, and from that time forth the night guard no longer subjects to fits of drowsiness. This coincidence struck Soda very strange, so he went to Isahaya Buzan and told him of his certainty that Otoyo was no other than the goblin. Isahaya reflected on this for a while and said, "Well then, how will we kill the foul thing?" "I will go to the creature's room," was the reply, "as if nothing were the matter, and try to kill her. But in case she should try to escape, I beg you to order 8 men to stop outside and lie in wait for her." Having agreed upon this plan, Soda went at nightfall into Otoyo's apartment, pretending to have been sent with a message from the priest. When she saw him arrive, she said, "What message have you brought from my lord?" "Oh, nothing in particular," he said. "Be so good as to look at it, though." And as he spoke, he drew near to her, and suddenly drawing his dirk, cut at her. But the goblin, springing back, seized a halberd and glared fiercely at him, saying, "How dare you behave like this to one of your lord's ladies? I will have you dismissed." And she tried to strike Soda with the halberd. But Soda fought desperately with his dirk, and the goblin, seeing that she was no match for him, threw away the halberd, and from a beautiful woman became suddenly transformed into a cat, which, springing up the sides of the room, jumped onto the roof. Isahaya Buzan and his 8 men who were watching outside shot at the cat but missed it, and the beast made good its escape. So the cat fled to the mountains, and did much mischief among the surrounding people, until at last the Prince of Hizen ordered a great hunt, and the beast was killed. But the priest recovered from his sickness, and Ito Soda was richly rewarded. What'd you make of that? You were very interested. You were very staring at the camera.
I was sucked in by this story. I kept thinking, "Oh my gosh, we should have made this into like a dramatic reading. This would have been super fun to do, like with sound effects and background noise, like make it like a almost like a audio
Mm,
play." or like audio radio drama would have been really
Funnily
fun.
enough, saying that, Alfredo mentioned the idea that doing that for like certain stories, like the folk tales and stuff, could be quite interesting. It's just it's just implementing it to a good standard. That's the thing. That's not something we're
Mm-mm-mm.
trained in. Not trained in. We train ourselves. We're doing a podcast. It's not something we're experts in.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about it.
I think it might be like for a short story, it might be fun to I would like to try, like, adding sound
Hmm.
effects and things. I think I might enjoy doing that.
Okay.
So, I might be looking for something, try to find something and see if we can be creative and see if it's something that's easy. I feel like it wouldn't be so bad to do, to implement.
No, I agree with you. We could try to implement it, or at the very least, we can do an episode like this where we just tell the story and talk about it, like we're going to do after this, and then we can always do a future one where we do a dramatic rendition,
Oh, that would be fun.
like a bonus
Yes.
of a bonus, a
Bonus,
bonus, if
bonus.
you will.
A story
Yeah,
bonus, a drama bonus.
dramatic bonus. Yeah. Well, we'll look into that because we've done previous stories as well that we can retell in that way. Try and get some other people involved, maybe for the different characters. That would be cool. I think that would be really interesting to do. So again, thank you,
Mhm.
Alfredo. And Heather, you had the exact same idea, so even better.
It's like Alfredo and I,
You're on the
when
same
we're
wavelength.
communicating. When I was hearing Vampire Cat, I think I was expecting a little more Dracula, I
Hmm.
guess. And we had a little Dracula because he the cat bit her
The cat
neck.
bit her neck, but it was more kill her. I feel that it was translated very nice. He bit her and throttled her, but I think it was more like pretty much ripping the throat out there. I think for
Okay,
me, the
yeah.
vampirism thing, she wasn't biting him, but her presence and her magic when she was near him sapped his life away, and I assume gave it to her. So kind of
Mm,
vampiristic.
yeah. So instead of, like, blood, it was life spirit.
Yeah, like the soul or something. Yeah.
It was an interesting story. I the thing that one of the things that jumped out at me was usually the stories we've had, it's always a beautiful woman and the male characters are never described. In this one, we had a nice description, and we also had, I feel like, so side note, I do watch K-dramas sometimes. I do like some K-dramas, and they often have, like a shower scene with, like, the male lead or, like, the second male lead, and I feel this is like the harbinger of drama where they have, like, in the middle of it, for no reason, someone in the shower bathing, and now we have Itasora in the middle of the story. He was very attractive, and he was bathing, and that was I was not expecting that. We have not, to my recollection, we haven't had a description of a male character, and then to have that kind of description as well, where the priest is like, I was wondering if the story was gonna go a different way because that priest seemed awfully interested, and I got very intrigued for a moment. It's like, "Really? Tell us more,
I didn't notice when I was saying that, but your eyes were like, "Oh," and I was like, "I'm not sure what she's picking up on here," but okay, you were like, you were just imagining a naked man, Heather. I understand. I see.
Okay, you go back and listen and tell me what you think when you go back to edit."
But now I can kind of see what you're on about. It's normally, oh, there's an old man, or there's a man, or there's a warrior. He's a nice guy, but you don't really know what he looks like. It's always a bit like the Tunkat Sparrow, the angry lady who looked horrible, and she was just bitter. And then yeah, they described Otoyo in this one, but then you get the description of the retainer. Sorry, I forgot his name. I've literally just read the
Hmm,
story. The retainer who ultimately helped. They could have just said, "Oh, they found a retainer," but
hmm.
no, in this one they kind of expanded upon it a little. But I wonder if that again is a translation thing to make it more Western.
I'm trying to think of Western stories from around this time period, and to my knowledge, I don't recall any sort of description of bathing.
You can definitely feel the Westernization though in some of the things. Well, apart from the sentence structure, which feels old, but they were calling them gentlemen and things in the story, which was, you would have got you would that would not have been a thing in Japanese.
And at some point, he was described as livid, And
Yeah, livid
my
means
I was like, "Is it
angry,
livid?"
but livid means I don't know in that context because they said he was pale and livid. And livid for me makes me think angry, which then makes me think red face, but he was pale. So there's obviously an older meaning for livid that, well, I don't know what it means. And what was the other thing? Oh, it was
Have to
also
look that one.
strange that during their conversations, when things were bad, they said it's wonderful.
I missed that one. Oh my goodness.
Let me try and
What?
find the specific bit.
Yeah, because that and I'm gonna look up livid while you're doing that.
So he's just saw the beautiful man bathing in the water, and the priest goes up to him. After finding out why he bathes, the priest says, "Your purpose is indeed a good one, but what a strange sickness this lord has. Every night he suffers from horrible dreams, and the retainers who sit upon him are all seized by a mysterious sleep that none can awake from. It is very wonderful."
Ah,
So,
so
like, he's saying it's strange, but
yeah,
wonderful was the way of saying it back then in 1871?
it could have been. I mean, we have oh gosh, I thought about this recently. What was it? The first Harry Potter where Ollivander is with Harry to give him the
Yeah,
wand, and he said that he was amazing, terrible, but amazing. So you have that still sense, like we usually use amazing now as wow, this is incredible. This is something that is a
yeah,
positive thing, but you really can use it. Like, full of wonder doesn't mean that it's always like a positive wonder.
mhm.
You could have a horrific wonder of how is this
True.
happening? But the common usage now is to be like
Mhm.
"Subarashi,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fantastic." And livid, I have oh my gosh, I've heard this description before. Have you ever heard of livid bruising? Or his face went livid, then purple. This is from the dictionary. Dark bluish gray in color. So you could have livid
Oh,
bruises. So if you get into a fight, you've heard that before. I know you have because I've heard that before too. So he went livid, like turned colors, like turned not a natural shade of color. So the he was pale, but also like kind of like that bluish kind of.
no, that makes sense because if when you watch shows like Criminal Minds or CSI, you can when they examine the bodies in the morgue, they say lividity is set in, which is the blood pooling, which so you get the
Ah,
bluish, grayish. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So we did know.
yeah, I think sometimes learning a second language, you sometimes really do forget some
Yeah, yeah.
things, and it's wonderful to go back and look. Anyway, oh, speaking of blood and things, like, where we got some yeah, I know you saw my face when you were talking about is Itasora. Yeah, the description of keeping himself awake. Ah, I did not enjoy that. No, I'm one of those people that when I hear like, I read or someone tells me a story, I picture things in my mind, so now I have this little visual movie of this happening, and, yeah, that was a very resourceful way to keep yourself awake, but I just keep wondering, especially back in whatever time period this was, the risk of infection for that had to have been incredibly high to, like, make
Yeah.
that kind of damage to yourself,
Mhm.
and at that point, for the next night, like, would have other retainers have tried this? I'm kinda surprised that, someone else didn't say, "I'll try that too." Little
Yeah, it's strange. The retainers were yeah, I was about to say it only happened that one night, but no, there were a few nights, and then eventually she stopped coming to the prince's side. So yeah, it's strange that the retainers didn't think to all adopt the same strategy. Like every night they kept coming back to say, "Oh, I'll stay awake this night," and then they don't, and then they wake up again. And Ito sort of was like, "I just stabbed myself and I stayed awake," and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." It's like, okay.
at this point, how much how many times did he and also I was kind of wondering like, "Oh, maybe he's gonna have like a pin or something underneath him that kind of like he puts a little pressure and keeps him awake." Nah, he went straight for the knife. I was like, You couldn't have tried something else before you went straight." Nope, he just went for it. What if the knife didn't work? Oh, that was creative and mildly horrific.
But apart from the horrificness, and apart from the shower scene, that's what I'm gonna call it. I thought it was a good story because, like you said, it had elements that you weren't typically in the other stories we've read
Mhm.
about. And
Yeah.
it was nice that, it's not a folk tale, so there's no moral. It was just a creepy tale about a supernatural creature.
Yeah, I agree. It was different, which,
Mm,
I always do love t I love classic, but I also love, going off the beaten path, so we had
yeah,
a little bit of differences. Also, although one thing that I kind of was surprised about was that the the cat, the creature cat, wasn't able to somehow injure
yeah,
Itosora. So I'm guessing that the power that they had was enough to overpower like a sleeping woman, but not for someone, even perhaps someone who was awake. So it had to be someone who was sleeping to get that vulnerability. Because I'm surprised that the creature didn't do anything to Itosora. He it just came back every night saying, "Oh, you're still up? Okay, well, I'm gonna peace out then."
yeah. It feels that. Yeah, she only because she came to the prince when he was asleep. So it's also interesting she didn't just take more life force from all the retainers that were also sleeping around her.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're right.
So I do wonder really how her power works, or she had a vendetta specifically against the prince.
Just went to the person in power and went, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and
Mm.
just start with this one." Although the creature did eventually go off to terrorize people as well. I'm wondering if there's any other stories related to this because in a way it was almost a little bit anticlimactic at the end, like, oh, eventually they sent people in to kill the creature.
I thought there'd be like a big hunt about how they hunted her down and found her in a village somewhere, but it's just like, oh, she ran away. We hunted her down. Oh, she's dead now. Yeah, I feel that they the main story was about how the prince was saved, and then after that is, sometimes when an author runs out of ideas and it's like, oh, the story's over, and then they died.
Or maybe it's like an epilogue, like a slight epilogue. Everything's
Mm.
great. Oh yeah, and we killed it. The end.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I did want a little bit more of
Mm.
a battle scene ending. I mean, we already had, action, drama, excitement, sleeping, stabbing, have a climactic ending. So it kind of went like more, and this happened, the end. But it
Yeah.
was still like a really interesting story.
Hmm.
And
I
I
think
really
so.
enjoyed it. I think that was a fun find and surprising to find a vampire cat.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. But thanks again for tuning in this week, guys. We hope you enjoyed the bonus. We hope you enjoyed Pokemon as well. I heard back from a few people who've heard it, and they said it was really fun. They enjoyed Heather's fish bee.
Fish bee.
The fish bee. But yeah, next week we're gonna do one more folktale as it relates to the Pokemon we talked about. Celesteela, not Celestella, like I called her. I got her name completely wrong. But anyway, until next week when we do the folktale, guys, that's everything from me. So, matane!
皆さん気をつけて。またね。